You have your monsters like zombies, vampires, and werewolves, and then you have your monsters like Dr. Frankenstein, Ardith Bay, and Jack Griffin. The two classic series monsters that most seem to be forgotten about either with their film output or quality of roles are undoubtedly the Phantom of the Opera and the Invisible Man. While I could talk all day about Phantom of the Mall or Phantom of the Paradise, 2025 marks a 25th anniversary for a bonkers and yet somehow faithful and tone-mad scientist that breaks the laws of physics and not only makes his physical appearance, but also moral compass quite invisible. Today we are looking at Hollow Man to see if it stands the test of time. First, a little history. The Invisible Man was written by H.G. Wells in 1897 and, like many of the classic Universal monsters were, was adapted into a feature film in 1933, directed by James Whale and starring Claude Rains. The series is much longer than most people expect, with sequels in 1940, two of them actually, 1942, 1944, and 1951. These range from the quasi-political thrillers to Abbott and Costello comedies, and the first sequel even stars Vincent Price. For a well-spoken and well-thought-out retrospective on the first run, be sure to check out Matt Draper's YouTube video, essay, and ranking on the series. Great stuff. The idea of the character would later show up in a series of Japanese films, as well as smaller parts here and there like The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, or in lesser films like John Carpenter's Memoirs of the Invisible Man or The Invisible Maniac. 2020 would finally give us a proper return in both title and idea with Lee Whannell's The Invisible Man starring Elizabeth Moss. 20 years later before that, however, we would get Hollow Man from Paul Verhoeven and Sony, and while it doesn't credit the original story or films, this is The Invisible Man through and through. Verhoeven wanted to make a much smaller movie after the crazy production and scope of Starship Troopers, while also toning down much of the sex and violence of that movie. Hollow Man does have a budget of $95 million, but much of that went to pulling off the special effects that are very much the crux of what the film is trying to do. Verhoeven had a lot of creative control over the film too, stating that he storyboarded the movie himself, and 90% of what we see on screen was actually how he envisioned it. That may have changed if the studio had its way when they assigned the Academy Award-winning William Goldman to do rewrites. Verhoeven allegedly told him no matter what the author wrote, he would disagree with it, and so there wasn't really anything to add. The two credited screenwriters are Gary Scott Thompson for the story and Andrew Marlowe for the story and screenplay. Thompson wrote the fun sci-fi horror Split Second with Rutger Hauer, as well as can be attributed or blamed depending on how you feel for starting the Fast and Furious franchise as the writer of the first entry.
That shit.
Andrew Marlowe would go on to create the huge hit TV series Castle, starring Nathan Fillion, but also give us the screenplays for Air Force One and End of Days. Verhoeven is, of course, the sometimes controversial director who gave us the previously mentioned Starship Troopers, but also had a hell of a run from 1987 to 1992, where he unleashed RoboCop, Total Recall, and Basic Instinct. The cast is a fun one with Elizabeth Shue, Josh Brolin, Kim Dickens, Greg Grunberg, Joey Slotnick, William Devane, Mary Randall, and Rana Mitra. The titular Hollow Man is played by Kevin Bacon, but the role almost went to Guy Pearce, Edward Norton, and a rumored Robert Downey Jr. The movie follows Sebastian Cain and his team of scientists as they work on a way to turn soldiers invisible. Turning things invisible is so far doable, but turning them back eludes the team. After they are able to successfully return a gorilla to visibility, Sebastian decides to test it on himself. They're able to turn him invisible like the other test subjects, but as they struggle to turn him back, he slowly goes insane. He frequently messes with the team to increasingly disturbing ways, and even leaves the facility after the team makes him a skin suit to use when he is in the lab. He sexually assaults his own neighbor, kills the military general that is going to close the program, and eventually kills off his own team one by one until just Elizabeth Shue's Linda, who is Sebastian's ex-girlfriend, and Josh Brolin's Matt remain. Matt and Linda are able to eventually kill Sebastian as the lab is destroyed, ending the experiment and movie simultaneously. The movie released to overwhelmingly negative reviews from everything to its excess and all things to even the score by Jerry Goldsmith, who worked with Verhoeven before. Despite these negative reviews on everything except for the special effects, the movie was a huge success, taking in $190 million at the box office and premiering at number 1 when it released on August 4th, 2000. The first indicator of this being in the range of 1997 to 2003 is the cast. I'm not referring to the main three of Kevin Bacon, Elizabeth Shue, or Josh Brolin either. No, the cast I'm referring to are old-timers like William Devane showing up in stuff like this and Payback after an already impressive career including Rolling Thunder. Greg Grunberg, Joey Slotnick, and even Rana Mitra at the start of her career. It's just a fun get-together that feels like a combination of stars. The movie also very much feels like a Paul Verhoeven joint with its nudity, violence, and language, which feels very international and not cut down due to American sensibilities. Hell, it's the only movie he didn't have to make drastic cuts to get an R rating. For what it's worth, but still feels like a movie straight from his ideas. A sign of the Verhoeven, if you will. Other things that feel like a movie directly from the year 2000, not the Conan O'Brien sketch, are the computer science jargon, the haircuts, the music, and some of the special effects. The computer jargon is just one of those things that the layman just took for gospel when it appeared on screen. And while it isn't as egregious as some of the others during this period, it certainly fits the bill of what we thought we would have. The special effects look decent for the time, and some of the ideas, including the infrared goggles, just work for what we had at the time. While Jerry Goldsmith's score doesn't reach the heights of RoboCop, he clearly adjusted to give us the late 90s era tunes we were accustomed to. If you're gonna have a genius narcissist as your main antagonist, then you better make sure he works, and boy does Kevin Bacon put in the work as Sebastian here. Even before the procedure turns him into a morally bankrupt psychopath, he's just very good at playing a dick. He's undeniably intelligent and driven, but he cares not for people's opinions of him, nor what he has to do to be successful, to say nothing of what he will do to get what he wants. The special effects also mostly hold up, at least when they use them right. All the ways they try to track his movements, from the previously mentioned goggles to the fire extinguishers and blood pools on the ground, all work in different ways and show the intelligence of the characters until they don't, but more on that later. When the characters are turning invisible, or already are, all stand out as good looking, even 25 years later. And things like burning him also work out and are done better than most special effects done in the era, which has to be attributed to the team behind it, including one of the masters, Phil Tippett. Some of the humor is genuinely funny, and that has to go to the cast even more than the screenwriter's efforts here. The cast all perfectly play their parts and succeed in delivering what they're supposed to be, even when their characters are written as almost stock characters.
And the Invisible Man says, I don't know, but my asshole is killing me.
In this rewatch, I found myself being even more bummed when some of them died and feeling paranoid and violated right alongside them. At its core, Hollow Man is a very good take on the Invisible Man mythos. A lot of people don't get how many people Jack Griffin kills or how crazy he goes, and this movie, on a smaller scale, does the source material justice while also being a better quasi-remake than a lot of the attempts after the mid-90s. While it is justifiably listed as a science fiction movie, the horror and gore ramp up considerably when it decides to go full-on slasher. For all the praise I heaped on the effects earlier, some of it does look a little cheap or at the very least out of date. Isabel the gorilla turning back into a gorilla comes to mind, and then some things like the skin suit being poured onto Kevin Bacon's head don't make sense if you look at it or think about it too long. Some of the scripting also falls flat, and even though the cast is able to mostly elevate the source material, there are intelligence gaps when the characters need to die, and some of the humor is just vulgar and doesn't land. The dog death probably wouldn't happen if the movie was made today, even if it does villainize Sebastian more, and most of the characters end up just being rough outlines without any real growth. While that's not a huge sin, especially in a one-off horror movie, it still adds to the forgettable nature. The two things that don't really hold up are the length of the movie and honestly how pervy it is. The length is just a matter of cutting a few scenes here and there without losing the overall feel, but the amount of perv in the movie is just uncomfortable. While Verhoeven is known for excess and sexuality and has gone on record for the movie as saying it's a test to the audience and how long they're willing to follow Sebastian, it can be a bit much at times. The rape of his neighbor and the fondling of his coworker are uncomfortable in ways that make you feel bad for watching it at times. Even when it's accepting it's a horror movie from a more open-minded director, it's still a hard watch in certain scenes even in 2025. While it's not as good as the 2020 reimagining that fully credits the source material, Hollow Man is a shockingly good time that hits more than it misses. While it can be needlessly mean and pervy at times, it's a great representation of a director with a vision and what a cast firing on all cylinders can do. There was a sequel 6 years later starring Christian Slater, and that can remain invisible, but this sci-fi horror is anything but hollow and stands the test of time.
Thank you for clicking on our video, everybody. If you like what you saw here, please make sure you like the video and subscribe and share with your friends who like this sort of content. JoBlo was created by movie fans for movie fans, and we appreciate your support.